All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today we're going to be looking at the college football transfer portal. There's a ridiculous amount of talent right now in the portal. I think you're at 1,200 or so players. It's a ridiculous amount. So today we're going to be, predicting where some of these top players will be heading. We won't make a prediction for every player because it's hard to, assume or pick these type of things. But I think we got some good intel here that can help dictate where these guys might be headed. First, there'll be timestamps below, but first we're gonna, start with some of the latest guys that have entered the portal, and then we'll move to positional rankings, and then to cap things off, we'll take a look at the entire list that 24/7 Sports has of top to bottom top-ranked players. So kicking things off, Reese Taylor is a guy I kind of want to focus on. He was a big-time corner for Indiana. This is going to be a good player for somebody. I think he's going to go to a contender, potentially Ohio State. He's a good cover corner. I like this guy. Luke Fickell in Cincinnati, they offered him back in early 2017 when Fickell first got there. So I think Ohio State or Cincinnati, that's going to be the two teams looking to get this guy. It's going to be a really good player. I think I expect him to end up with a contender. He's going to be an impact performer. Very interested to see what he can do. I was kind of shocked to see him enter the portal, as I was with a lot of guys. So Andrew Van Buren, Boise State, they've not really been able to run the ball much the last 2 years, but he's kind of a bigger back. I like what he brings to the level in terms of physicality. He's from California. Boise State, again, they couldn't run the ball, so production-wise, it's not great. But this is a guy that can pick up some yards in short yardage or at the goal line. No idea really where he might go, but I do think this is a pretty solid player for somebody as a potential number 2 running back. You look down all the way here to Trey Palmer. He's been at LSU for the last couple of years. He was a high 4-star coming out. This past season, he was pretty impactful. I think he had like 30 receptions, 300 or so yards. He made some big plays for them. He's from Louisiana. He's a guy who can still play in the SEC, so I do expect him to stick around with a perennial contender, or maybe an Auburn. Maybe he'll go to Bama to add them some depth. But it's a pretty good player in Palmer, so we'll see what he does. Melquan Stovall, wide receiver. His brother played at Cal for Jared Goff, many years ago. He's going to follow Jay Norvell to Colorado State. You look at Jeremiah Lewis from Duke. A respectable corner coming out of high school. He's a notable name, I'd say. Miles Kendrick. He battled at Kansas for the job. He's kind of a dual-threat guy. It's Kansas. What can you really do? They had the UNT transfer, Jason Bean, show up, and he kind of won out the job. But it was kind of a 3-man battle at Kansas when he was there. Kendrick, you'll see him probably – he's from San Jose, so maybe he ends up at San Jose State. But I think he'll end up at a Group of 5 team. And the last guy that entered here over the last day or two, Kevin Mensah, I think this will be a really good player for somebody at UConn. He was probably their best player outside of Cam Ross, a receiver. I really like what he brings to the table. He had a 1,000-yard season 2 years ago. You remember UConn did not play in 2020. In this past season, they were, just utterly terrible. But he's one of the bright spots on the team that was not very good. Kevin Mensah from Massachusetts. Maybe he can go to Boston College, pair up with Pat Garwo or something. I think this is a really respectable ball player. Can't wait to see what he does. So moving to overall the positions, Quinn Ewers, you saw he went from Ohio State to Texas. He was committed to Texas at one point. Went to Ohio State. I think he kind of finessed the system with the NIL deals. That's what that was all about. But at quarterback, starting with the top uncommitted player, according to 24/7 Sports, is Cam Ward. A lot of people don't know about this guy, but he was a star at Incarnate Word. 4,600 yards. He had 47 touchdowns this past season. Comes from the air raid background. He's been getting some big offers, including Ole Miss. I think he's going to end up there. Matt Corral, he's leaving. I think he's going to end up there. Or at Washington State, his old offensive coordinator, or his old head coach at Incarnate Word, he's now the OC at Washington State. And he has, multiple years of eligibility remaining. So I do think that although Jaden DeLora is a rising star, I think he's going to be a very good ball player. Cameron Ward, 4 years of eligibility remaining. I'm very interested to see where he goes. I do think Ole Miss or Washington State is probably most likely for him. Dylan Gabriel just committed today, actually, to UCLA. It made sense. Jeff Lebby was his OC at UCF. Many predicted him to go to Ole Miss. They thought he was going to be a lock, and then, he went to Oklahoma. Jeff Lebby, that is, and, Gabriel, he's not going to go out there and beat out Caleb Williams. And Josh Heupel, who was his head coach, Hendon Hooker, opted to return for his senior season. So the options kind of seem limited. So UCLA, they're going to end up landing Gabriel, DTR. I think this is his final year of eligibility. He's a senior, I believe. I think he could come back. I'm not sure. Eligibility is kind of confusing after last year. Everybody got that free season. So we'll see what happens. I think it's a good little pickup. They got some good pass catchers, Chase Cota, Kyle Phillips. we'll see who all comes back for them. Greg Dulcich, I think, at tight end, he'll probably be declare. So I like what they got at receiver. They got some good talent. Spencer Rattler kind of shocked everybody by going to South Carolina. It's not really a shock to me because Shane Beamer, well, actually it is. The reason so is because South Carolina, you don't really think of them of a team that's going to compete. They do have Shane Beamer, who's one of the rising head coaches right now. He got SC to a bowl game. I like how they're playing defense. Quarterback, they struggled significantly this year. Luke Dottie was not very good. Him and two other guys kind of battled back and forth. So Rattler will show up day one in Columbia and be the starter. I like the fit. Austin Stogner is tight end for Oklahoma, also went with him. Them two and the head coach Beamer, they're very familiar from their time in Norman. So I like what they have there. Rattler going to SC. This should be really good. I think South Carolina's going to be a tough team to beat next year, especially at home. I've not seen the schedule, but if they're hosting some big-time names, those are going to be fun games to watch. Max Johnson, I like this guy. He's a gamer. Right now he's projected on the crystal ball to go to A&M. I'm not really high on that because Connor Wigman, the 5-star quarterback freshman that's showing up, I like what Jimbo seems to like what he brings to the table. He's very confident in him. Zach Calzada did transfer out. Haynes King, though, should be back in the rotation. I don't think A&M is a spot where they're going to look to bring in a veteran quarterback. They could. I do think Johnson's a gamer. I like what he brings to the table as a runner. I think he's a flashy passer. Will he go to A&M? Probably not, but that's what they're crystal balling right now. I think that'd be a pretty good pickup for them, but at least for the short term. Long term, I don't think he's really going to be the answer for them, or at least what they're looking for. Keaton Slovis from USC. He never really progressed under Graham Harrell as the OC over the last couple of years. Jackson Dart, that's officially his job now. Unless Caleb Williams pulls a stunner and transfers, which I don't think he will. But Slovis, he's gone. I think he might end up back in his home state of Arizona. I think Cal and then Pittsburgh are more likely. Kenny Pickett, he's obviously going to go to the draft. Slovis, his girlfriend actually goes to Pitt, so I think that's probably the fit there. Very similar style quarterback, a guy that likes to throw the ball a lot, can do it with touch downfield. Slovis, obviously he didn't develop very much, but I like what he brings to the table. He's a good passer. So Bo Nix, I don't really have a prediction here. I don't know. I've never been really impressed with Nix. I like the talent he brings to the table. I think he's a phenomenal talent as a dual threat. I like his arm. The player, though, not so much. The decision-making has not been good. His dad, he's a coach's son. He's a very good ball player. Remember his first game, he had that touchdown pass late to beat Oregon in Arlington. I'm not sure where Nix will go. I think maybe a team like Nebraska could really utilize his skill set. I think it'll be interesting to see where Nix goes because he has a lot of potential. It never really worked at Auburn. I think a change of scenery is definitely in his best interest. So I'll be monitoring where Nix goes. The talent is there. I think Nebraska would probably be the favorite for him and his services. Zach Calzada, just not a player I'm very interested in talking about. Other than the Alabama game, he was not very good for the Aggies whatsoever. It was crazy. He shined in that game, but that was it. I don't really know what else to say. Jacob Zeno, he's going to UAB to play for Bill Clark. Jack Sears, he's transferring again for the second time. Remember, he started his career at USC. Now he's at Boise. Now he's leaving. Chevin Cordero, I didn't see this one. I did not see that he committed to San Jose State. That's very interesting. He's a good player. I wish he would have. I think there is a chance he still ends up at a powerhouse program, maybe a Group of 5, or a high-end Group of 5, maybe a Power 5 school. I look what he brings to the table. Cordero, he leaves Hawaii. Jonah Johnson, New Mexico State. They're not good at football really whatsoever, but he's an underrated player. I like the arm talent he brings to the table. So this will be another one I'm monitoring. He's probably going to end up though at an FCS school or something, but he might be able to slide into there. Maybe a team like ECU or something. A team that's replacing a quarterback of a similar skill set. That's a player that I'm going to be interested in watching. Lane Hatcher. He's going to play for Jake Spavital, who's a good offensive coach, but I don't really like. This is a good player. I don't know why he's going to Texas State. I think maybe they know each other. Maybe there's some connections down there. He's leaving Arkansas State. A good ball player, so it sucks that you're not going to see him play on a higher level, but good for him. I think he'll shine there at Texas State. And Jay Kaner, he opted to stay at Fresno State. Remember Kalen DeBoer left for Washington. He instantly jumped on the portal, and he ended up reverting back. He was actually committed. He actually started his career at Washington, so we all figured he was going to head back there and end it with his head coach. He decided not to. A great player. He's going to be one of the top 10 quarterbacks next year in the country. Jacob Sermon, he's going to play for Ed McCaffrey at Northern Colorado. I think Ed is still there. Look at some of the other quarterbacks here. Jack Plummer from Purdue. He was in that air raid system. I'm not really sure where he'll end up. That's a good player, though, I think. Someone's going to get a good guy there. And then, just scrolling down the list, Jack Miller from Ohio State. He's dealing with some off the field. I think he had a DUI a couple weeks ago. He was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school. So we'll see what Jack Miller does from Arizona, Scottsdale. He might head back and play for the Wildcats. They got Jed Fitch. I think that'd be a pretty good fit for Miller. Looking at running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs. Tashad Choice's running back coach is headed to USC. So that might be that's probably likely the prediction. I think that's where he'll end up. Of course, he's crystal balled to Alabama, but that's never set in stone. I really like this guy. He's a versatile player. He's an asset on special teams. This guy is phenomenal. His freshman season was so impressive. He wasn't as good this past season, but this is a good player. Someone's going to get a gem right here in Gibbs. Next after him, you have Zach Evans. You remember he was the highest-ranked recruit in TCU history, a 5-star. It took him forever to commit. Remember, it was sometime late in the summer before he finally made up his mind. He's a Texas native. Depending on what Isaiah Spiller does at Texas A&M, I think you're going to see Evans bolt to the Aggies. Jimbo did recruit him coming out of high school. Georgia was also high on his list. I think he was committed to them at one point. This is a very good ball player. I think he's coming off a 1,000-yard season, I believe. Somebody's going to get a really good player. I think Texas A&M or Oklahoma. This is most likely for Evans. Again, I think if Isaiah Spiller declares for the draft, then Evans is pretty much a lock for A&M. But we'll see, because he'd still have to share a backfield with Devon Achane. But, man, that'd be a heck of a pickup for Jimbo and crew. He's already got they're on pace to have the number one recruiting class by far. So, Tyon Evans, he's a good slasher back at Tennessee. He had some good games. He had a monster game against Missouri earlier in the year, like 4 touchdowns, 200 yards. Jalen Berger, Michigan State, they continue to be active. He was a very good runner from Wisconsin last season. This year, I guess he wasn't very committed to the offseason programs, so the coaches, they just didn't put him on the field whatsoever. But he's a good player, bit of a bigger back. Wisconsin, the best. Remember, 2020, their offense really struggled, especially running the ball, but when he was on the field, that's when their best offensive output happened, was when he was playing. Kenneth Walker is leaving. They're going to turn around and replace him with a good player in Berger. Chris Brooks, he's a tough runner too. Leaving Cal for Purdue. Okay, that's a good pickup for them. Lynn J. Dixon, Clemson to West Virginia. I expected him to have a breakout season for Clemson. I don't know what happened. They didn't give him the ball at all. They gave him 1 carry against Georgia, and he ended the game as the leading rusher. They couldn't run the ball whatsoever. They gave him the ball 1 time, and it was 9 or 10 yards. He's a speedster. He's a very speedy back. Expected him to be a breakout player. It just didn't work out. Something in the offseason, I guess, did not allow him to earn the touches, so kind of disappointing 2020 from Dixon. Chip Trainum, he was a very good number 2 behind Rashad White. 4 years left. That's pretty interesting. That's a pretty solid player. Hassan Hall, leaving Louisville. He was a very good number 2, I thought, for them over the last couple of years. One thing I would like to say about Hall is I think he will go to Syracuse. That's the prediction, because I think he's a pretty solid asset to an offense. Sean Tucker right now, he just had a phenomenal second season. Redshirt freshman, so he was his second season. He had 1,000-plus yards. Dino Babers did recruit him a couple years ago, and he was committed to Syracuse at one point under Babers. And again, they don't have a number 2 for Sean Tucker whatsoever. I think 2 quarterbacks have more rushing yards than the next leading running back does at Syracuse. So I think Hassan Hall will end up looking at wide receiver. 2 of Oklahoma's top-ranked recruits from a class a couple years ago with Hazelwood and Theo Weiss. Those guys have opted to transfer following Riley's departure. Hazelwood's headed to Arkansas. Phenomenal downfield blocker. I like his hands. I think he's got some good reach. He's got the ability to go up and get it. Never really shined as a receiver. He had that torn ACL in his first season. I think this was his first year back. He just got back to being healthy. Or what was it? I can't remember. I know he had a torn ACL, I think, and then he missed a year. Something like that. I know he didn't play very much for them as anticipated. Theo Weiss, he also missed most of 2020. I think all of it, actually, with a lower leg injury. He was the second leading receiver for them in 2020, though. I think TCU or Texas are probably the most likely options here for Weiss. An Allen, Texas native. He's a bigger guy. I like what he brings to the table all around as a skill set. He's a taller guy. So Theo Weiss, and Stogner too. I guess they lost 3 of their impact pass catchers. They're pretty depleted there. I mean, they're still pretty stacked as well. Oklahoma is, but they did lose 3 important players. Taj Harris, he is headed, it's not updated right here, but it is kind of confirmed that he's headed to Kentucky. I expect Wan'Dale Robinson to transfer out, but they also landed him. And then Travion Robinson. I think this is going to be a pretty nasty receiving core next year, regardless of what Wan'Dale does. If he stays, though, they're going to have a nice trio here of explosive playmakers for Will Levis to deal with. Harris, I really like what he brings to the table as a speedy downfield. He's a guy who can make plays on a go route. He's got good hands. He was the leading receiver for Syracuse far and away. A very good ball player. I like what he brings to the table. And then Travion Robinson, he's pretty similar skill set to Wan'Dale. He can do multiple different things. He can even make plays on special teams. So Kentucky, they got themselves a great pair of transfer receivers. You look at Jake Bobo. He's a taller guy. He's a veteran. He's caught a lot of balls at Duke. He's headed to UCLA along with Dylan Gabriel. So they're getting some offensive talent along with 2 running backs they already have that are really great in Charbonnet and then Britton Brown. We'll see if they go stick around, but they're getting better on offense. Chip Kelly doing some good things there. And Jadon Blue. This is a guy who's caught a lot of balls at Temple. I think you're going to see him. I think he's from Maryland. They offered him back in 2014 when Mike Loxley was the offensive coordinator. 169 grabs, 1,600 yards in his career. I think he will end up at Maryland. Very high potential offense, especially with Loxley as the coach. Jaden Blue, I think he'll go back home, play for the Terrapins. Ajoy, Clemson guy. He's headed to USF to reunite with Jeff Scott. Jacob Copeland, he's currently slated on the crystal ball to reunite. Not really reunite, actually, just to go to Maryland. I don't really know of any connections there, but he was a very good pass catcher, I thought, for Florida. Never really maxed out his potential, though. Of course, that kind of he had a pretty solid year, actually, under Kyle Trask, I will say that. Elijah Cook's another one of those Nevada players. He was a very good receiver for Carson Strong. He didn't play a lot this year. He was held to about 3 or 4 games. Is Jay Macklin, is he related to Jeremy Macklin? Probably so. Yeah, that's his cousin. Okay, so Jeremy Macklin's cousin is headed from Missouri to UNP to play for Seth Luttrell in North Texas. Justin Marshall, notable receiver. I think more importantly, Jalen Hall and Michael Tinsley. These guys were very impactful at their respective schools. 1,000-yard receiver. Tinsley from Missouri. The Tigers, they've been making a lot of moves in a recruiting cycle. This is probably a guy that will probably end up there. It's kind of a shock to see him enter the portal after an 1,100-yard season. Jalen Hall, another guy. He was the number 2 to Sky Moore at WMU. This is probably a guy who could probably end up at Michigan State or Michigan, one of the better schools in his home state. Very good ball players here available for a lot of teams in the transfer portal. Ricky White, a speedster. Remember, he had a good year last year. Didn't play this year. I guess, another one of those guys who had some off-the-field issues or just issues in practice, so he had a disappointing year. He didn't play at all that I'm aware of, but he had some bright moments as a freshman, so that's a good ball player to look out for. The only notable in the offensive line I really want to talk about, Kingsley. I can't really pronounce his last name. Good pickup here. This is a big, physical offensive lineman. He's going to be playing for BYU. He's committed there. He's from Utah. Perfect fit playing for Kalani Sitake. This is a really good pickup for the Cougars, and I think it's a good fit for Kingsley as well. Win-win for both of them. Another receiver I didn't mention, Micah Pittman. He's an explosive special teams asset. We'll see where he ends up, but that was another guy that was a pretty big deal when he decided to enter the portal. Looking at the defensive line, Jared Verse. It's a guy that 24/7 Sports is pretty high on. He played at UAlbany. Don't really know much about him other than as a redshirt freshman, he had 10 tackles for loss. He's a bigger guy, 6'5", 250. So, from Pennsylvania. See where he ends up. I don't really know much about him. I haven't seen him play. But appears he had a pretty good season for UAlbany. Defensive line, not much other than Michigan State. They did pick up another player in Chris Bogle to Sean Manning. I'm pretty sure was at one time an offensive lineman on the interior for Auburn. He's headed to Kentucky. I guess he's made the transition to defensive line. J.H. Tevis, he's an impact player. He's headed to Indiana. Don't really know what the connections are there. But he was a good defensive end coming off the edge for Cal, and Justin Wilcox. I thought he was a very good player. He got some great size, too. So he's a guy who could shake things up in the Big Ten. There's not much on the defensive line other than I do think Anthony Watts here from Purdue. He's going to be a big-time impact player. Or not a big time. I think he'll be a nice rotational defensive lineman like he was at Purdue. 10.5 tackles for loss over the 18 and 19 seasons. He didn't play much as a freshman, and then this last season, he didn't play much. In 2020, he didn't play at all in 21. He's 6'4", 300 pounds from Houston. Anthony Pondexter, he was the defensive coordinator for the Boilermakers for a few seasons. He's at Penn State now. I think he'd be an asset for PSU. They're going to need some. They want to continue to have size and some rotational help on the interior defensive line. So I think Anthony Watts is a guy that will end up at Penn State. Moving to the linebacking positions, Maryland, they lost 2 strong players. Brandon Jennings, 12th ranked inside linebacker in the class of 2021. And then, Terrence Lewis, he was the number 1 ranked linebacker in that same class, 5-star player. Both of them are leaving. Some big losses for Mike Loxley. Jennings played a little bit as a freshman. Lewis didn't play at all with an injury. He went to Miami Central. He's, from the area. Miami, they were not in his top 6, though, back in 2020 when he was a recruit. He was a UT commit. I think, this is a speedster. This is a guy who can make a lot of great tackles using his insane athleticism. I think he'll end up playing somewhere in the state of Florida. I think the Gators are probably the favorites, along with the Hurricanes. Getting Mario Cristobal, that should certainly help. That should be a guy that's going to be at the top of his list in the portal, Florida or Miami. That's likely where he'll end up, I think, in the state of Florida somewhere. Brendan Jennings, he's also from Jacksonville. I think you could probably say the same for him. Not really sure his reasoning on transferring, but, 6'3.5", 225. He's a big player from North Florida. So we'll see where these guys end up at. But some big-time losses for Mike Loxley on his defense and 2 good linebacking recruits. They were, the cornerstone players of their class last year. It gets even better, though. Look at this. Aaron Brule, he was a terrific run stopper for Mississippi State. This was kind of a shocking guy that entered the portal. He's been very good for them over the last 2 years. He's headed to MSU. Mel Tucker is very active. They also landed Jacoby Wyndham, who was fresh off a big-time season for UNLV. 119 tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss. This is a guy that was very good for UNLV. You remember they added Quavarius Crouch. Cal Halliday had a pretty good year for them. They're continuing to make a lot of waves in the transfer portal. I think this is 2 very good assets at linebacker for the Spartans. Mel Tucker doing a lot of good things for them. Mohamed Sanogo, he had about 60 tackles, I think, 2 years ago. He was one of the top linebackers for Ole Miss. Not saying much because their defense wasn't very good. Just some of the other guys on screen. I do think one guy that's going to be very impactful, Gabe Reed from Stanford. This is a guy I think is going to be a good ball. Reed from Stanford. He was an impact performer for many years at outside linebacker for the Cardinal. I think this is going to be one of the better impact players. I think he's going to end up as a contender. He's a big guy, 6'2", 230. I think he's even bigger than that. He's very productive coming off the edge. He's from Provo, so maybe he ends up at BYU. That'd probably make the most sense. But I do think there's a chance a team like Alabama or Clemson reaches out to him because this is an impact performer. He was at Stanford for numerous years under David Shaw. So some very good ball players here in the linebacking position. Looking at corner, Ryan Watts. First Eli Ricks, he's going to Alabama. He was projected to be an All-American. I think he probably will. But during his time at the Tide, one comes in, other goes out. Marcus Banks. This guy's got really good speed and vertical. He can cover vertically, that is. Good ball players. Crystal ball to Miami. He's from Houston. I'm not really familiar with him too much. But, one comes in, one goes out. So, not too much available in terms of corners available on the market. But Ryan Watts is another one of those guys. He never played much really at all at Ohio State. But this is a guy a lot of people like. He's got some good size. He's one of those. I think he's a guy who could really mold into a phenomenal press corner. You look at him, he was committed to Oklahoma at one point. You might see him head there or to Los Angeles since Lincoln Riley was the guy he agreed to play for back in 2019. And then looking at special teams, Sean Shivers, he's a physical runner. He's headed to Indiana. Tyrese Chambers, he actually ranked second in college football in yards per catch, almost 24 yards per grab. And he also had a 1,000-yard season. That's pretty insane production for FIU. Currently slated on the crystal ball to go to Mississippi State. I think that'd be a phenomenal asset for them. from Baltimore. No idea really where he'll go. He was unranked coming out of, it looks like JUCO. But this is a very good ball player. Got a lot of speed, explosiveness. He's going to be asset somewhere, a smaller guy, but Chambers is a good ball player. So to cap things off, we'll just kind of look at the list 24/7 Sports has put together of the top ranked recruits. Great class. The transfer portal is going to be very impactful for many years to come. I like a lot of the players they have available. Very interested to see where a lot of these guys end up as well. That's going to wrap everything up for today's episode. There'll be timestamps below. You can jump back and forth to where you want to go. And that's going to be it for today. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. See you guys next time.